Evening, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today in this Legit class. I'm Chahat Verma, moderator for the session, and I'm deeply honored to have Ms. Gunjan Paharia and Ms. Komal Kaul as our esteemed speakers today. Our first speaker is Ms. Gunjan Paharia. Ms. Gunjan is the founder and the managing partner of ZS IP Advocates, with an area of expertise that includes trademarks, designs, copyright, and patents, and other related included under the umbrella of contentious and non-contentious IP. She has been mentioned in various publications as one of the leading IP attorneys in the country and was also named in the list of lawyers published as 40 under 45 to watch amongst the legal community in India. She has been consistently ranked by World Trademark Review for strategy. Welcome, Gunjan ma'am. It's an honor to have you here today.
Thank you, Chahat. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, LegitQuest, for hosting this webinar, and thank you, everyone who has taken their time out on a Saturday evening to attend this session. I hope we will make it interesting as well as informative enough for you to make it worth your while. Because we just have around 40 minutes and trademarks is a really big aspect. I'm going to get to it straight away. I just want to first introduce, just to give you a little context on what exactly a trademark is. A lot of people just feel that trademarks are, brand names, they are logos, etc. So, taking a step back, I just want to, let you know that the context here is that a trademark is a source identifier. So the deal is that if there is anything about your product where a person or a consumer or a public at large sees it, views it, hears it, etc., and immediately can associate it that it is coming from you or it is your product is a trademark. So that, yes, of course, it can be a word, it can be a device or a logo like the BMW logo or a device like the Amul girl, which is not really, it comes on the product, but it's more an advertising, but it's become so well known that the moment they see that caricature, they know it's an Amul product. It could be a music. So every time, for example, you open a Nokia phone and, the tune comes, and that tune is a registered trademark. So, every time you hear that tune, it is a Nokia phone or the Britannia tune for that matter. While these are all considered non-traditional trademarks and we are still understanding, and the trademark office is still, checking on how they're going to register it, but I must say that smell, taste, sound, etc., they are all capable of being trademarks. The sound of the Harley Davidson motorcycle is a trademark, for example. Shapes can be trademarks, for example, the Johnnie Walker bottle or the Coca-Cola bottle, the shape of that bottle itself. So, for example, if you were to see that bottle without Coca-Cola written on it, you would, just from the shape of that bottle, you would recognize that it is a Coca-Cola bottle. So any such aspect of your product that is so distinctive or has been made distinctive by consistent use over the years, that the moment the people see it and they can associate the product with or what the product is a trademark. Trademarks can be, of course, registered, and even if you've not registered it, it still constitutes as a trademark because the use is as that of a trademark. So please remember, before we go into the procedure of it, that a trademark is a trademark whether registered or not. And India is a use-based country. So the person who uses it first has better rights. Registration adds value to it. Registration adds strength to it. Registration has its benefits, of course. But even if you are not registered, it is a completely good and enforceable trademark that you have a right to protect, which we will go into how to protect them the later half of the session. But for now, I will just hand this over to Komal to explain exactly how the first step, as in how to register a trademark and what is required. That's over to you, Komal.
Ma'am, I'll just introduce Komal, ma'am.
Yes.
Our next speaker is Ms. Komal Kaul. Ms. Komal is a partner at ZS Advocates, and her area of expertise includes trademark designs and copyrights. She has over 10 years experience in strategic managing of international trademark portfolios, conducting and analyzing clearance searches, creating filing strategies for and prosecuting applications, oppositions, invalidation actions, enforcement advisories, as well as representing clients in intellectual property litigation in various courts. Welcome, Komal ma'am. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'll hand over to you now.
Thank you, Chahat, for the wonderful introduction, and thank you, Gunjan. Now that we have ascertained what are trademarks and what is the importance of trademarks, it is necessary to decode the steps to register it, the information required to register it, and most importantly, the best practices to be adopted to ensure a fully safeguarded trademark registrations. I will first start with the steps for registration. The number one step is, of course, filing your trademark application. You can file a paper application with the Indian Trademarks Office or file an application online at the Trademarks Office portal at www.ipindia.nic.in. You will require a digital signature and a bank account for filing the application online. The official fees is 9,000 rupees for a company and 4,500 rupees for startups and small scale enterprises. When you file an application for registration of a trademark, you need to mention a list of goods and services for which you intend to use your trademark. India follows an international system of classification called the NIS classification, according to which the goods and services are categorized into 45 classes, with goods covered in classes 1 to 35 and services covered under classes 36 to 45. As an example, if the trademark is Apple, that is to be registered for goods such as mobile phones or computers, the relevant class here will be class 9. And similarly for trademarks such as Airtel or the newly launched VI, the relevant class will be 38, which pertains to services such as telecommunications. If you do not know which class or classes your goods or services fall in, please use the list of goods and services as published by the Indian Trademarks Office. It is easily available on their website. If you are a foreign entity who wants to protect your trademark in India, consider claiming priority. India is member to the Paris Convention and signatory to the TRIPS agreement. Hence, an application can be filed in India, claiming priority from the application filed in a foreign country, provided the foreign application was filed not earlier than 6 months from the date of filing the application in India. The required information filing the application is number one, the name of the person and organization that will own the rights to the trademark, that is the applicant, the address of the applicant, the nature of business of the applicant, what he does, example, manufacturers, merchants, service providers. You need the trademark, of course, the class, specification of goods or services, date of first use of your mark in India. This is optional. And in case you have claimed priority in the application, then the priority date, the priority application number, and the priority country. The documents that you will require are the application form, the representation sheet, and in case a priority is claimed, then a certified copy of the priority application. Of course, you also have to pay the official fee to the Trademarks Office, which can be paid by check, demand draft, or online payment. Once the application is filed, the next step is to examine it. It's called the examination of the trademark application. In approximately 1 to 2 months, the Trademark Office will send you the examination report, either citing the objections or in the absence of any objections, allowing the application to be published in the Trademarks Journal for a third party to raise objections. The time to respond to this examination report is 30 days from the receipt of the same, and the deadline cannot be extended. So it is important that you file a response with the Trademarks Office within the deadline of 30 days, or your application may be abandoned. The objections that are raised by the trademark office are within the umbrella of absolute grounds and relative grounds. I'll briefly tell you what absolute grounds likely objections can be. So they can be as under. Number one, your trademark is not distinctive. That is, your trademark is not capable of distinguishing the goods or services of one person from those of others. The second objection is that your trademark is descriptive or devoid of any distinctive character. That is, your trademark directly refers to the goods or services for which the protection is sought. Number three, your trademark is a generic term or is customary to trade. For example, orange for fruits and software for software services cannot be registered. Another objection that can be raised on the absolute grounds is that your trademark hurts the religious sentiments, is obscene, or is prevented under the Names and Emblems Prevention Act, or is such a nature to deceive. The objections under the absolute grounds can usually be overcome by stating that your trademark has acquired distinctiveness by extensive usage over a period of time, and that the public in general identifies your product or services by your trademark, and your trademark is related to only you and no one else. So to prove this point, documentary evidence will be required to be filed in support of your claim with the response. The second umbrella of objections is raised under the relative grounds. The relative grounds, to understand, is a bit difficult if you go theoretically, but in simple terms, it means that there are similar trademarks which are already existing on the register and in the trademarks office. The objections under the relative grounds can be overcome by stating that your trademark is different, of course, from other cited marks in the examination report. In what ways your trademark is different from the others needs to be explained in detail. Submission of documentary evidence of extensive usage of your trademark will also help you to strengthen your case. The third step is hearing before the examiner. After you file the response to examination report, 8 to 10 months after that, the trademark office will either allow the application to be published in the upcoming journal for a third party to raise objections, or the registrar will fix a hearing by sending you a hearing notice with a date and time to meet the examiner and basically explain why your trademark should be allowed to proceed towards registration. This opportunity should be ideally exploited to explain the examiner the evidences filed at the time of responding to the examination report in detail and to submit additional evidence. Subsequently, the examiner will pass an order either allowing or refusing the registration of your application. If it is a refusal, you can appeal against the order of the examiner before the Intellectual Property Appellate Board or the IPAB. The fourth step is publication of the application in Trademarks Journal. Within 2 to 3 weeks from the date of the examiner's order to publish the trademark, the application is published in the journal. You can download the trademark journal and check if your mark has been advertised. After the expiry of 4 months from the date of publication of the journal in which your mark was published, check the status of your trademark application online. And if there are no objections or oppositions by third party to your trademark filed by any other person, the way is smooth for registration. In the event, if any person raises an objection to your trademark application by way of an opposition, the trademark office will notify you of the objection along with a copy of the notice of opposition as filed by the other party. Opposition proceedings are usually a bit complicated. I suggest that you consult your legal counsel in case the situation is such. The last step, of course, is that everything is done now. There are no oppositions, even after the 4-month period for which the mark is open for opposition. The trademark office will grant registration to your mark and issue the registration certificate. Once you receive the registration certificate, peruse the contents of the certificate to ensure that there is no discrepancy in the data. And in case of any, please bring it to the attention of the examiner and have it rectified. It is a fairly simple procedure. Once the mark is registered, it is valid for a period of 10 years from the date of filing the application. An application for renewal of a trademark registration can be made 1 year prior to the expiry of the registration. The mark can be renewed every 10 years and thereby is protected indefinitely. These were the brief steps that are followed for registration of a trademark. Now that we are aware of what a trademark is, what are the brief steps involved for its registration, the next portion that I'm going to handle is that what are the best practices to ensure foolproof protection of your trademark. These can be classified into four main best practices. So the number one being that prevention is better than cure. So it is very important that you search the records of the trademark office. So before you file an application for or even consider using your trademark, search the records of the Indian Trademark Office to check if someone has already chosen the same or a similar trademark. You will have to search the exact class of goods and services for which you will be using your trademark. If you see any similar trademarks already on the records of the trademark office, you should be cautious. You will now have to carefully analyze each and every trademark and take a call on going forward with the same mark or possibly changing your trademark so that you don't infringe another's trademark rights. Another added way to do this search is to search on Google. In a common law country like India, usage of a trademark gets importance over filing an application or obtaining registration for a trademark. Searching using Google and seeing if anyone uses the trademark that you want to adopt, then if you do this little bit of research before, then you have crossed a big hurdle. So after looking at a party who has, you probably find that party on Google, please do a bit of a research to see how much they have used their mark, the period of usage of the mark, the goods or services for which it is used, and whether the mark has gained any reputation. More importantly, I think is to compare the marks yourself and decide whether your trademark will infringe the rights of the other person. Your few minutes of research will save you from the risk of choosing a deceptively similar mark, which may result in lengthy oppositions and infringement action that obviously costs a lot of time and money. The second best practice while applying for a registration for your trademark is to claim the date of first use of your trademark in India. Using your trademarks in India plays a very important role in trademark protection strategy. And since India is a common law country, usage plays an important part in terms of overcoming objections on absolute grounds by convincing the examiner that the mark has acquired distinctiveness and also in oppositions and any action against third-party infringers. If you're filing your trademark application claiming use from a particular date, you are mandatorily required to submit an affidavit along with the evidences attesting to such usage of the trademark. Earlier, such user affidavits were only submitted if specifically required by the examiner. However, post the Trademarks Amendments rules in 2017, the requirement for filing a user affidavit has been made mandatory. When the trademark application has been filed with sufficient information and requisite documents, and the mark passing the tests of objections under absolute and relative grounds, the trademark office allows the application to be advertised. This, in practical terms, saves several months of delay because of the entrance steps, such as missing POA and user affidavit, etc. Number three, the third step that you can adopt to ensure a good trademark protection and a quick trademark protection is to submit all necessary documents at the time of filing. Now, there are only 3 documents that you have to submit at the time of filing the application. This is the certified copy of the priority application in case you're claiming priority. The user affidavit with documentary evidence, again, only in case you are claiming use in the trademark, and the power of attorney if you're filing the application through your counsel. Besides these documents, if the applicant is claiming the status of a startup or a small enterprise, then a copy of the startup recognition certificate or the MSMS certificate needs to be mandatorily submitted while filing the application. If the said documents are not submitted at the time when you file the application, the examiner usually raises a non-substantive objection on missing documents, which not only causes delay in your application proceeding to the next stage, but also additional counsel costs for late submission of documents and responding to the trademark office's objections. The fourth and the most important way to ensure protection of trademark is to maintain prosecution hygiene. It is very, very important to record all changes in title, such as the change in address, assignment, etc., with the trademarks office as soon as they take place. Any such delay in recording the changes affects the owner at the time of enforcement, when the capacity to challenge can be questioned by a third party. So these were the few best practices that you can adopt to get a good protection of the trademark. Now, moving on to the next portion of the presentation, Gunjan will be taking up the best practices to enforce your trademark. So Gunjan, over to you.
Thank you, Komal. I hope you found that informative. I am going to be covering how to protect your trademarks. Rather than just taking the legal route to advising you on what options are available, I would like to do this in a more commercially, with the focus on the commercial aspect of what is your best practice where you're trying to protect your trademarks. Trademark is an intellectual property. It is just like any other property, including your immovable property. It requires protection, it requires nurturing, it requires maintenance, it requires enforcement, it requires everything. And yes, of course, it is valuable, just like any immovable property or an asset that you may own. So the first thing is that let's look at from a perspective of a new business owner who's just starting up. As Komal said, that before you start, you have an idea about what your product is going to be. You're setting up a business. All that is great. Most of the young startups, they make a mistake. They're saying, by thinking that, oh, we're just starting up. I'm not really sure whether we should be taking care of or going into the rigmarole of getting our trademark registered, etc., because we don't even know whether the business is going to do well or whether the trademark's going to take off, etc. Now again, that's not a really good idea, because if you look at it from a perspective, if your business does well, which I'm sure it will, and your trademark and the product takes off, that is when the copycats come in. And once the copycats come in and your trademark is, has gained any goodwill, any value, etc., that is when there are other third parties who are looking to copy you, copy your product, which basically means that they are now looking to stall. So if you're going to wait for your, for a confirmation that your trademark's going to take off and do well, and and after it's done well, you apply for a trademark, the chances are that there will be a lot of third-party oppositions, etc., who don't want you to get a registration, because the moment you get a registration, you are going to start enforcing and have the possibility of filing infringement actions, etc., against them. So commercial aspects also come into the opposition phase when you're registering. It is not only someone who has a prior interest in the trademark or a similar trademark will oppose your application. There could be all kinds of competitors as well who are, who will try to stall the process of getting a registration. So it is my advise that every time you start up or you're trying to adopt a new trademark, do your searches and register early. So be early, because once the business is beginning, nobody's even looking at you, nobody's looking at copying you, etc., because you're just beginning. The chances are that your registration will go through smoothly are much higher, and once you have a registration certificate, then you're really through, and all your protection, etc. It's not a very expensive exercise, and any startup which you're putting your blood, sweat, and tears into will merit that you protect early on what you're actually trying to build. So that's one. So be early. Don't shy away or don't procrastinate on, oh, we'll get to it kind of thing. trademark should be registered as soon as possible. The moment you have a you have a lockdown on what trademark for what product you're going to be doing. Now, so that's one. Now, from a very commercial angle and a commercial aspect, if you're looking at, now, for example, you have a trademark. Let's just, hypothetically build a scenario where you have a trademark, your product's doing really well. Now you've run into trouble. Now, the trouble could be two types. One type is that when someone starts copying you, right? When someone starts copying you, basically, what do? I would think that you need to find out who he is. When did he adopt? Because it is possible that you may not have a pan-India presence, but somebody in some remote town in the country looked at your trademark and said, "Oh, I think this is a business idea," and adopted the same mark or a similar mark and is trying to pass off your goods in a smaller area or a smaller geographical area, and you actually don't come to know about it for 6 months, and but you need to have that intelligence before you file a suit of exactly what product he's making, how he's using it, what is the nature of his use, what is the vintage of his use. Commercially, I would also want you to get some kind of an intelligence on how big the party is. Do they have any other business interests? Knowing the enemy is actually far better than just being trigger happy about filing a case, etc. And going the whole hog early on without the intelligence. Let's not go into it blindly. That would not be my advice. Let's just find out who the enemy is, what he looks like, etc., and then formulate a full strategy which is holistic, which is cost efficient and quick. That would be the best practice on enforcement. So coming on to when someone has adopted a mark after you have adopted and started using the mark. As I said earlier on, India is a common law country, use is supreme. So, anyone who starts using the mark early on, the first to go on use is the first proprietor and is the owner and will have superior rights to the trademark. So once it is confirmed that the person actually adopted the trademark, even if it was a deceptively similar mark, much later than you did, and for same goods or similar goods, etc., and that comes into the strategy, is that is when you decide whether you're give it up because he's so small, he doesn't have the wherewithal or the bandwidth to actually go through litigation, or he is so, his use is so new that he's not really that invested in the trademark. So if he receives a legal notice from you, he will give it up. Then we would recommend that yes, this party qualifies that, let's just try sending him a legal notice, and hopefully he'll give it up and the matter will end. Of course, if he doesn't give it up, then the next step has to be escalated to a litigation. Two, if your pre-action intelligence says that the party is really big, they are invested, they've spent lakhs of rupees in pushing out this product, they have a lot of inventory already, etc., and they're so invested that they're not going to give it up, or a legal notice is not going to scare them, then our recommendation generally is that the party is far too invested and a legal notice will only kind of inform them and warn them of a potential action which they could derail or which they could preempt, etc. And therefore it is just better to catch them by surprise by just filing the case. So this is, it's not like a one size fits all. Every strategy is different, every case is unique, etc. So that is if the person is obviously adopted the mark after you have adopted it, and you have a great case, and the legal advice you receive is that you have superior rights, you have a superior case, etc. All great. Now the second problem that may run into is that because you're so busy building your own business that you've not actually looked around on what people are doing, and you've not invested enough time, bandwidth in watching what the competitors are doing or building. So there are instances where while you are so busy building your business, what the other person has done has gone and taken a registration, right? And you don't have a registration, but he has a registration, but you do have superior rights. But now that when you're going to be enforcing this, your rights in the trademark, you are running into someone's statutory rights. And, again, then the strategy will kick in as to what are we going to do about his registration. So first step, of course, is that you have, you cancel it. I mean, I would recommend that you invest the time and have the bandwidth to actually watch what everyone's doing, get a legal counsel or do it yourself. Every week a trademark journal is kind of advertised. It is available on the trademark office's website. You can download it, you can take a look at it. Anybody who's applied for a similar mark, etc., it will show up and you can see that, okay, this mark has been advertised and I can oppose it, right? And then file an opposition rather than not watching it at all and letting him get a registration, because it's always a pain. And getting opposing is a far easier process, and not allowing him a registration is a far easier process than having to cancel a valid registration. That's, it's more expensive. It is far more difficult to do it. The threshold of evidence required to cancel someone's trademark is high. So, you're just kind of adding on to the effort that you're going to make this problem go away. So yes, but supposing it does happen and someone's got a registration, well, not all is lost. So don't lose heart. Just because he has a registration doesn't mean he has any superior rights, because the rights come from use. And but of course there'll be an added step in your enforcement strategy, which means that you will have to also file a cancellation of registration before you can send him a C&D or file a litigation against him. Other person having a registration, you have to argue and justify it in case because you want a injunction against the guy. So it's an added step, but it can still be done, and it has to be done. Now there are other problems that you may face while you're doing you're going about your business, that you've not done a search or whatever, and you have a registration or you don't have a registration, but someone else got a registration before you, and his adoption date may be before you, but he has, and your business intelligence says that he has not started use. So even if he has a registration which predates your interest in the mark, but he hasn't commenced use, and therefore you still maintain your superior right. Now, how to handle that party? Now, for example, you could write to him. If he has not commenced use, you can try alternate methods. You can tell him, you can negotiate with him that why don't you sell us this registration, which is always a convenience, because for the same amount of money that you will be spending in litigation or a cancellation action, maybe you can just give him that amount of money and just buy the registration, and the problem is solved. You gain a registration, and it's a great, it's a win-win situation for everyone. If they have not used it, then you can also file a cancellation, but this doesn't have to be married to a litigation, because litigation you will only do when there is a commercial loss happening somewhere, and the person is in the market, etc. When there is no product in the market and you're not being commercially prejudiced, and it's just a subsisting registration that's bothering you, we can just file a cancellation and then take it from there. And if he's not commenced use, maybe there are chances that he'll not even contest cancellation, and you can just get a default judgment on the cancellation and his registration will be cancelled. So that's your second. Now again, now I will stop here. This is a straightforward strategy, straightforward case where you have a trademark, you have a superior right, you need to stop people, and it's fairly straightforward. Now, the problem runs into because of our choices of marks. So for example, you have to understand that what is similar mark, what is the strength of the mark, for example. So the strongest marks are the ones which are invented, like Kodak, for example, right? Now, anybody in the world, because Kodak has no dictionary meaning, it is an invented word, it is the strongest trademark that can be, because anybody in the world adopting Kodak for any kind of goods will never be able to explain of how he adopted it, right? And therefore, your chances of success are always very high, because the moment you say that his adoption itself is nullified and he did it obviously because he heard of me, because Kodak actually doesn't exist in the world. I mean, I invented the word. And of course, your chances of success are much higher because, when the adoption itself is bad in faith and, is, he doesn't have an explanation and you can enforce your trademark very easily. The problem happens when our choices of marks become slightly not on the invented side, but on the arbitrary side. So for example, Apple, right? So Apple for software is of course distinctive because, Apple has no reference to software or hardware or mobile phones, for example, or computers, for example. So Apple for anyone who, kind of, does a similar mark like Apple or Opel or any other, you'll have a great case because it's the same category of goods. But if somebody starts an Apple, say, footwear, right? Would the Apple company actually have a very strong case because Apple does exist in the dictionary and he can say that, I actually did, I just took a fruit's name for my footwear and it has got nothing to do. I'm not using your logos. I'm not using any of your devices. I'm not trying to pass off. It is very difficult to explain of what is the commercial loss to you because someone adopted Apple for footwear. And therefore, that's where your enforcement starts getting weaker. So there are two things. So for example, if you have, say, as an example, if I would say, take Nokia, for example. Now, Nokia is in class 9 and it has hardware and mobile phones and all kinds of stuff. If someone actually adopts Niki or a Noki or a Nika kind of trademarks, which are not identical but similar in your core class for mobile phones, what right would Nokia have? So that is one set of enforcement where somebody adopts a similar mark in the same class. Now, in a scenario like that, again, business intelligence is mandatory. I would say you need to find out who the person is, who the enemy is, what they're doing, etc. And whether they have registrations, whether they have, even if they started after you, but if they still have 10 years of use, for example, then they have an independent goodwill and reputation. So you may be a brand which started in 1960, but if your enemy is a guy who actually started his business and has been selling his product since, say, 2000 and has 20 years of use, he still has goodwill and he still has a case and he still has his own rights in his own trademark, and the marks are also not similar. So what do you do in that case? You don't want him to kind of obviously start passing off his goods and slowly and steadily come very close to your business and it starts hurting you. So in those cases, what we do is that we also recommend alternate defensive strategies rather than offensive strategies, where you say that, okay, listen, Noki is a problem, but you have been using it for, say, just compact discs for the last 20 years. I'm going to let you use it for compact discs, but you cannot expand the use of this mark to beyond compact discs. So he can't tomorrow come and say that, okay, I was making CDs and, now I'm going to start making DVDs, then I'll make a DVD drive, and then I'll make a computer, and, because I adopted the mark 30 years ago. You need to stop that and nip that in the bud. Have that business intelligence, get it, and then try and see what defensive measures you can take to limit him. Your intelligence could also say that, he's actually just selling in the state of Gujarat, for example, right? Now, you can't stop him. You can't get an injunction. He has 20 years of use, right? But and he's not using it for computers so far. So a litigation expense is not merited. You cannot stop him for compact discs, but you definitely want him to stop from expanding the trademark to the use of computers, etc. So what do? You send him a legal notice, and hopefully, you tell him that, or if he pushes back that, no, I'm going to be doing this, then you try and negotiate a settlement to say that, okay, your main interest is compact disc. I will let you use your trademark for compact discs, and you can continue doing that. but please don't ever expand, and should we see that you're expanding, we then will file a case against you. A good outcome of a negotiation like this is that the other guy actually agrees and says, okay, I will use it for compact disc and I will not use it for anything else. Or I will use it for ABCD products, but I promise that I will not sell it beyond Gujarat, for example. So, that is also a victory, because then you've stopped him from selling his products pan-India or even exporting it to other countries where, you would have an interest in, and this could cause serious commercial loss. And without really incurring the expense of, an expensive litigation, or the, you always have to, from a commercial business owner's perspective, never forget that, litigation is a risk. I mean, what happens if the judge holds against you, right? So, and that bad judgment is going to come and haunt you in all future cases, and it could just dilute your own goodwill. So be very careful of what battles you're going to, turn into wars. As a, I've been in the business for 20 years, and I'm a firm believer, if more than 25% of your conflicts are actually going to court, then you have a strategy problem, because you're not only spending far too much money than is necessary, but also risking, the brand value. So, for example, if you're going to be trigger happy and taking a, Nokia versus Nico case to court, when you know that the person has been using it for 20 years for compact disc, the chances are not very high that you're not going to win on that aspect. Why would you invite a judgment to that effect? So be very careful. Choose your battles wisely. I would say that would be a best practice. Try and see if you can have alternate methods of enforcement and protection. Yes, of course, where the case is good and where you think that it is going to cause commercial loss, please go the whole hog. Yes, litigation is an option and you must do it. However, there are cases where you feel that this is probably a borderline case. I may win, I may not win. I really want to spend so much of my hard-earned money in litigation, which would then go into rounds of appeals, etc. I would rather just settle, and so that we can just all focus on our business and our commercial enterprise, for that matter. So, so be very careful. I would say that is the only best practice I can technically advise, that be very, very wise and very, very careful on enforcement. You have to protect your property where you think that, it is malified, it is causing a problem. Please don't shy away from going the whole hog, but be pragmatic about it, and see of what battles you actually want to turn to war. Otherwise, we can just, adopt alternate strategies, I would recommend. The other best practice I would say is that from the day you start using your mark, you must have a body of evidence that you collect. So, for example, a lot of business owners actually start a business and then they say, oh, we didn't put it up on our invoice. And, then that invoice cannot be used 5 years down the line as evidence that, in 2015, I was using this brand, and this is the evidence that I was using this brand because it's showing up on my invoice. So these kind of body of evidence. So for example, if you're doing any advertising, you must save the bills. If you're doing any publicity, you must save that evidence, and start building a folder of all the evidence of use that you've made. If you're participating in any trade fair, etc. Save the evidence that I did participate. Take photographs of your stall where the trademark was very prominently displayed. If you've received any award, please make a list of those awards. Be very careful of how you're documenting it. If you are, if you're digitally active and if your products are available online, etc. All the sales invoices, any publicity material, any unsolicited press coverage that you may have received, someone's done a show on you or someone's written an article on you as a, an upcoming business. All these evidence needs to be saved. So start building that body of evidence, because this is the only body of evidence that a court will recognize when you go to court against someone, that, this is the evidence. Just saying, we get that a lot of time where the clients say, oh, 10 years ago this happened, but I don't know how to prove it. That kind of is, we don't know how to help either. I mean, we can make a statement, but unless we can prove it by way of evidence, it's not going to be, of much relevance. So start building a body of evidence very, very quickly. Choose whether it is, offensive or defensive that you're doing. And the third thing is that if you feel that, your product is actually your pain point is not really someone adopting a similar mark or whatever, it is pure counterfeiting. So basically what that means is that someone's actually making a counterfeit fake product. He's putting your name on the carton, he's putting everything, but it's just a fake thing that's coming into the market. Then your enforcement actions are completely different. You have an option of doing criminal actions against them, actions under criminal law. You can do raid and seizure actions. You can do civil actions where you can get an injunction, and then you can also ask the court to appoint a local commissioner who will go to his premises, seize the counterfeit product, etc. If you believe that it is, it's actually being imported into India, then we would recommend that you do a registration with the customs office. So what you have to do is, it's a fairly straight procedure. It takes time and has delays, but it's procedurally it's fairly straight. If you have a registered trademark, just register yourself with the customs department, your trademark. And the customs department will then look at all the consignments which are coming in. And if they feel that, it's a counterfeit product, they will inform you that this consignment has come, and, and then we can take it from there and make sure that the consignment is not released for the product to come out into the market. Actually, I've just, I can speak on and on, but I believe we've run out of time. I believe we now have the question and answer session.
Thank you so much for such an insightful and knowledgeable session, Gunjan ma'am and Komal ma'am. It was quite informative. So moving to the Q&A session, ma'am, should I start putting forth the questions?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So ma'am, we had a lot of questions, but we had to pick only few due to time constraints. So I'll just take them one by one. So the first question is, what remedies are available to owners of infringed marks?
Well, passing off and infringement both are available to you. Passing off is when you file an action in court where you say, I don't have a registered trademark, but I have a trademark that I've used for so many years, and it's it's done well, and now this guy is copying me. So typically what happens is that infringement is, and it's basically the same action. The remedies are the same, the reliefs are the same, except that you can file for infringement if you are registered, if you have a registered trademark, and you file for passing off if you don't have a registration. And passing off is basically, logically speaking, it is that the product is in the market, it's on the shelf, and people are buying that product thinking it's mine. So he's passing off his goods as those of mine. So that's the remedy. Infringement, on the other hand, is saying that I have a statutory right to stop all other people from using this trademark, and this guy is using it. So what happens is that in infringement, the body of evidence required, if you have a registration, is actually lower because you have a statutory right, which is government granted. But in passing off, where you don't have a statutory right, you have to prove that, your threshold of evidence goes up, that you have to prove that it is your trade, give your revenue figures, you have to give your sales revenue, advertising revenue, to show that the public at large, or your relevant segment of your public, is actually aware of your trademark. And it is, the consumer actually wants to buy your product, and by mistake, because it is just so similar, they are buying the other guy's product. So the body of evidence goes up. Otherwise, as far as the reliefs are concerned, the procedure is concerned, the trial procedure is concerned, they're all the same for infringement as well as passing off. So typically, if you have a registered trademark, we do file for infringement as well as passing off. We claim both. But if you're not registered, then we can only file for passing off. I hope that answers that question.
Thank you so much, Gunjan ma'am. Komal ma'am, would you like to add something on this?
No, I think Gunjan has really clearly elaborated it, so I think that's about it.
Okay, thank you so much, ma'am. Moving on to the next question. In case for unregistered trademarks, what are the legal remedies available? How are rights in unregistered marks established?
Purely by use. That's it. There is no other way. You use it, you sell the product, you work hard to build the brand value of that product, and that's your right, and that's your property. That's all. As far as remedies are concerned, it's the passing of remedy, and you can do that. There are, of course, other remedies like customs, criminal, you may not be able to do the criminal action without a registration, but the civil action on passing off, you can do. But how you create rights in an unregistered trademark? Purely by use. There is no other way. You just have to use it.
Okay, thank you so much, ma'am. Ma'am, the next question is, what characteristics are essential for classification of an act as passing off?
Okay, so now this is a tricky one because that depends on the trademark. So for example, if your trademark is a word mark, like the example I gave was Nokia. So Nokia versus Nokia, but similar marks. So the law actually allows you to stop others from using deceptively similar trademarks. So as far as words are concerned, it is, you just have to see what there is enough case law which says that the consumer has average intelligence, has imperfect recollection, etc. So, it is actually a very qualitative assessment that the judges will do to say that, okay, these two marks do look alike and, they do sound alike. The test of similarity is on three. It is phonetic similarity, it is structural similarity, it is visual similarity. So for example, Coca-Cola, it's written in a very particular, style, right? Now, if someone uses, say, Popa Popa, but in the same style, right? Now, visually it's the same because it's and structurally it's same because the stylization is so similar, but the phonetic element is completely different. It is Coca-Cola versus Popa Popa, but that's not how the judges will see it. It's it is actually seen on all the three parameters, and if they feel that consumer is going to be a person of imperfect recollection, he may also be semi-literate and may not actually be able to read, and he's just recognizing the product by the stylization of this writing, etc. And yes, that would be a great case because the public is being fooled just by the stylization. So at one time there used to be Cadbury's and Chaudhry's written in the same. The Cadbury's written also on their sweets and chocolates and candies, it's written in a very, very distinctive font. So if someone just copies the font irrespective of what the word is, that would be a good case. If your trademark is a label mark, for example, it's a color combination. It's like let's just say the yellow and red of a DHL envelope, which is a very specific combination of colors. Then another courier company having the same combination, even if it is not DHL, it is XYZ, doesn't matter, but that trademark has become so distinctive that people see a red and yellow envelope and they know it's DHL, and therefore it's a source identifier. So anybody else using that yellow and red combination is going to be a problem, and you probably have a good case. So it actually depends on in the passing off of how many elements there are in your trademark. Are there device elements? For example, if you have two elephants holding a sun and some guy gets two dragons holding a sun, is that structurally similar? It's a very visual, phonetic, structural assessment that the judges will make while comparing the two marks and saying that yes, there is a chance that there is a likelihood of deception and confusion, and the public is likely to get. You don't have to prove that actually a consumer did get confused, but if the court believes that yes, there is a likely chance that someone could get fooled, then they will give you the relief for that. So it will depend in passing off. It will depend on how many elements your trademark has. Does it have a word element? Does it have a color element? Is it a shape element, etc.? And then the courts will decide of what is deceptively similar or not.
Thank you so much, ma'am. You have explained it really well. Komal, ma'am, would you like to add something?
Apart from what Gunjan said, I think traditionally what the courts have am I audible? Hello?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
Okay, so apart from what Gunjan has said, traditionally the courts have just given 3 criteria for passing off. So it has to be established that you as a plaintiff were the prior user of the mark, of course. Then there has to be misrepresentation. And third, but last but not the least, it is that the owner who you have suffered injuries or damages as a result of the misrepresentation. So these are the 3 classical tests or trinities that the courts have traditionally adopted to ascertain whether it is a classic passing off or not.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thanks, Chahat. You can. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. The next question is, can I protect my trademark by registering it before I start to use it?
Yes, of course. As Komal said that, so Indian law actually allows you that if you're adopting it and you've not started using it, you can still file an application. It will also get registered on a proposed to be used basis. Once it is registered, the Indian government and the Indian law will allow you 5 years and 3 months from that date of registration, not the date of application, but the date of registration, to start your business and start using that trademark. If you don't commence use of that trademark for 5 years, then the law allows other parties to adopt it by cancelling yours on the grounds of non-use. But yes, you can register the trademark before you even start, which is what I also recommend that you do, because it will be an easier process. And then start using it within the next 5 years of after having registered it, if you don't want to have it cancelled. And the cancellation is also not suo moto. It's not as if the trademark office asks you that you've been registered for 5 years, so please give me evidence that you've started use. That doesn't happen, but a third party does. So in case any other party wants to adopt the same mark, has done a search, has run into your registration and thinks it's a problem, they've done their business intelligence and realize you've not commenced use, they'll have it cancelled so that they can start using the mark without any threat from you.
Okay, thank you so much, ma'am. Speaking of domain names, which are now highly visible in real space, can a domain name become a registered trademark?
So my assessment again here is that a domain name is generally your trademark, right? Or a trade name. So trade names are trademarks. So if you are, for example, so for example here, again, going back to the Nokia example, supposing I am the owner of Nokia trademark and you start a company which says Nokia LLP, right? You've started using it as a trade name, right? I would still have an infringement action against you, which would be valid. So trade names have the same as same sanctity as a trademark. Now on the domain names, now it will depend on what your domain name is. If it is Nokia.com, if it is NokiaLLP.com, whatever, there is obviously not going to be any exclusivity or monopoly given to the GLTD, which is a .com or a .in or .co.in. So your mark actually becomes, what the prefix of your domain name is, and most businesses will use that as a trade. It would either be a trademark which identifies their product, so that the consumers to access it and search for it, or it would be a trade name. So you could be an ABC company who has 40 brands, but they just have one website which is ABC, which is their trade name, and then or the company name, and once you go to the website, they have these 40 brands showing up. So yes, that ABC is also registrable. You will have to, you can register it, you can protect it just like any other trademark, but don't call it a domain name because it is a trademark. So just because you do, Nokia.com, so the .com has no relevance. It is the non-distinctive portion of the trademark. So don't apply for Nokia.com, just apply for Nokia, for example. Because that's your trademark. The other aspect which a lot of people do is the exciting domain names. For example, thebestbakeryintown.com, for example. Now, if that is the question, and those are the kind of domain names you're talking about, that you're a bakery and you just registered a domain name which says thebestbakeryintown.com. If the question is that the best bakery in town registrable, I would say no, not for baker's goods, of course, because it is non-distinctive. Every bakery in town would have a legal right to call themselves the best bakery, to use the word best or bakery, etc. So those kind of domain names will not be registrable as trademarks. Even as trademarks, they will not be considered trademarks. So you're not going to get a registration of it unless you can show that you have these amazing amount of use and goodwill. So for example, some non-distinctive trademarks actually are registered today, like Payless Shoes or the leading hotels of the world. So these are all registered trademarks, but they weren't registered on day one. They were registered after they showed that, they have years and years and years of use. And today, any hotel which kind of, puts this up, that, they're a part of the leading hotels of the world, is a trademark, and people understand what the organization is when they have been granted the registration. But this can't be on a day one that I want to adopt the best bakery in town kind of situation.
Thank you so much, Gunjan ma'am. Komal ma'am, would you like to add something?
Nothing more than what Gunjan said, that yes, of course, domain names can be registered as trademarks. Trademarks are a part of domain name for all the major companies. It has to just fulfill the qualities of a trademark. It has to be unique. It has to be capable of identifying itself and distinguishing its goods and services. And it has to act as a reliable source identifier of concerned goods and services on the internet. So, I mean, yeah, that's about it.
Okay. Thank you so much, ma'am. And the next question is, what are the modes of filing trademark internationally?
Okay, so because Komal did the procedure aspect of this presentation, I'll let Komal take this one.
Yeah, thank you. So for an Indian applicant, you have two options to file your trademark internationally. Either you can file a trademark application with the respective trademark offices of each country in which you're seeking protection, or you can use the WIPO's Madrid system. So what Madrid system does is, so first of all, the Madrid system filing is provided under the Madrid Protocol in India, and India acceded to the Madrid Protocol in the year 2013. So what the Madrid system does is that if you have a trademark application or a registration for a trademark in India, you can file an application under the Madrid Protocol with the details as per your application in India, and you can actually choose out of the 92 countries that are a part to the protocol or the agreement where you would like to file in one go. Each of the trademarks offices which you have selected will receive the details and treat the mark as though it was filed in their own country directly. The clear advantage over here is that instead of filing individual trademark applications in each country, the Madrid Protocol provides a one-stop shop for all countries. I would, however, like to caution here that there are also disadvantages of the Madrid Protocol, and the part of examination where the marks are tested on distinctiveness will depend on each country's laws. So yes, the filing is very easy under the Madrid Protocol, but then thereafter the process is individually adopted by each country and as per their own trademarks and rules.
Thank you so much, Komal ma'am, for explaining us the procedure. Moving on to the next question, is the trademark liable for removal on the ground of non-use?
Yes, it is. As Gunjan said, if the trademark has not been used for a period of 5 years and 3 months from the date of the registration certificate, then any aggrieved person may file for a cancellation of a trademark registration. Now here, the catch is that an aggrieved person, a person who files a trademark cancellation action, has to show that he's aggrieved. Now, this definition includes a person, it is actually not given in the act, but it would include a person who believes that he is being damaged by the registration, or someone who has an earlier pending trademark for the same mark, the owner of an earlier registered trademark, and basically any person who is in some way or other substantially interested in having the mark removed. And it also includes persons who are substantially damaged or prejudiced if the mark remains on register. So like Gunjan said, that it is very important that the moment you get a registration, you start using it, because then it becomes vulnerable to cancellation after 5 years and 3 months from the date when it is actually entered in the trademarks register.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Gunjan ma'am, would you like to add something?
No, that was all.
Okay. Ma'am, moving on to the last question. In India, what is the criteria for a mark to be considered well-known?
Komal, you want to
Okay. The well-known trademarks definition is given under the Act, but to simply put it in a very short and crisp manner, a well-known trademark is a trademark which is actually popular and recognized easily by the public. Certain examples of well-known trademarks are Bisleri, BBC, Red Bull, for example. Now, coming to the question on what is the criteria for ascertaining a well-known trademark, well, broadly put, Section 11 Clause 6 to Section 11 Clause 9 breaks down the criteria that the registrar shall look for, among other things, to determine a well-known trademark. Certain factors which the registrar shall look for will include knowledge and recognition among the relevant section of the public in respect of the mark, the geographical extent and length of time for which the mark has been promoted, the number of actual and potential users, any successful ruling, which is the most important part, by which the trademark has been determined as a well-known trademark by any competent authority, etc. So this is the most important part to determine whether the mark is a well-known trademark or not. So in case in an enforcement action, a court has held that the trademark ABC is a well-known trademark, it is a very important proof that yes, the mark is well known, and in case that is submitted, then the mark will be declared as a well-known trademark. Under the Indian Trademarks Act, after the Trademarks Rules 2017 were enacted, there is a provision that any person may file an application along with the prescribed fee to designate their mark as a well-known trademark. In order to establish that the mark is indeed well known, the applicant will have to support its claim to that effect and the supporting documents, which have been laid down in Section 11 Clause 6 to 11 Clause 9 that I just explained.
Thank you, ma'am. Gunjan ma'am, is there anything that you would like to add?
Just one thing that, the Act even today says that, the relevant segment of the public should recognize your mark as a well-known mark. So basically, if you have a medicine, then your relevant segment is the doctors, etc., right? And if you can prove that, amongst the community or etc. Pharmaceuticals are so specific. It could be an eye drop, for example. It could be a revolutionary drug for an eyesight issue or a throat issue or anything, right? So because it's so illness specific, so so the relevance. So obviously, public at large will not know your product, so you just have to prove that my product amongst the medical circles. And even if it's, for example, if it's an eye drop, then you have to say my relevant segment is actually ophthalmologists, right? They're not like doctors at large. Why would a cardiac surgeon know about an eye drop? So it's the relevant segment. However, where the products become more kind of like a beverage category or a food category, then your relevant segment becomes public at large. So you know that criteria has to be met. So if you're selling a soft drink, then you have to kind of, your threshold will be that, you know, I've sold so many bottles and I've spent so much in advertising and everyone knows my soft drink. But if you are selling an eye drop or an ear drop, for example, or a throat lozenge or something, then your threshold is much lower, because you just have to then look at your relevant segment. So one, that has to be looked at. So again, it's not a one size fits all. And the second, because you know, it always helps where a court says that your mark is a well-known trademarking at filing any infringement action or passing of action against any third party at this time, please ask your legal counsel if you can, you know, when they're asking for relief, so you're asking for injunction, you're asking for A, B, C, whatever. Just ask your legal counsel if they can add that extra relief, that you ask the court that I am asking that my trademark should be declared as a well-known trademark. The court may be in a good mood and actually give you that relief, and if the honorable judge actually puts it in the order saying that, you know, this is the well-known trademark, unless you ask for that relief. So please ask your legal counsel to add and ask for that relief in any any infringement or passing of suit that you may be filing against anyone.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Looks like we have covered all the questions. Is there anything else that you would like to add before we wrap up?
No, I'm just saying that we are very, very excited about the startup ecosystem in this country now, and we also, I understand it's a 1-hour webinar that people may not really have the time to actually ask us all the questions, because they're going to be so targeted to their business especially. So I would like to say that, you know, for startups, our firm does pro bono service as well. It's available on the website. So if you have any questions, please reach out to us. You can avail of our pro bono service, advisory service on intellectual property, which is specially geared and focused towards the startup community. And we'll be happy to help you, anything that you want.
Thank you so much, Gunjan ma'am and Komal ma'am, on behalf of Legit Quest and Mr. Karan Kharda, to spare your valuable time for this Legit class. It was truly an honor to have you both. And
likewise.
Thank you, ma'am. Before I wrap up, I just want to apprise the participants that this class was organized by Legit Quest, which is an artificial intelligence-based legal research product. It is a state-of-the-art legal research platform for conducting legal research and is very well known for the introduction of the world's only one-click insight system called the iDraft Case Analytics. In short, the iDraft feature, powered by artificial intelligence, takes out the issue, facts, arguments, reasoning, and decision of a case law. Legit Quest has recently started with Legit Eye, which has the latest news, interviews, and columns, and serves the stakeholders of judiciary. I would like to thank everyone for being a part of today's Legit class. For recording of this Legit class, you can subscribe to Legit Quest's YouTube channel. We hope to see you soon again next time. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.